In fact, they can just, keep your account number and your login information and all your ledger and just port it to the new one. So from your side as a consumer, you're going to log into your bank account, you're going to get a bank statement, you're going to use your debit card and not see a change through the whole system from now to FedNow to then, I don't think. They could come out maybe with a new app, with a new interface on the website, but a lot of this you're not going to see. So this is how they're doing it. They're doing it behind the scenes, slowly implementing the technology so that we can do electronic payments in tranches or steps. And then what you'll see is they're rolling out in a pilot form in other countries with smaller economies to see how that goes. You've got China in Asia, in Africa, you got Nigeria, and you got other pilot projects in the rest of the world.
Welcome to Gold Silver Pros. Searching for the best precious metals deal? Shop with our trusted partner, Arc Silver. Access special deals on silver, gold, and platinum through our website or call 307-264-9441.
Hey everybody, this is Rob Kientz with GoldSilverPros.com. Today is April 6, 2023, and today I want to talk a little bit more about FedNow because that system is here or it's about to roll out. It's going to come out in July, and I wanted to clear up some of what it is and what it's not as I've started to research it. It's not the central bank digital currency, the digital dollar just yet. I think it may be the precursor to it or maybe a template, and we're getting into a little bit of details, but nonetheless, it's here. And it's something that's definitely going to affect your life because it's going to change the way that we make payments to each other. And actually, there are a lot of good things to like about it, but also some other things that I think it's going to be the precursor to what will be the central bank digital currency in the US. And so by examining that, maybe we'll have an idea of what's coming. So we're just going to jump right into it. I'm not going to take too long to get right into it. Here is the official press release from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. We're on their website, federalreserve.gov, for those of you following along on the podcast. It says here, Federal Reserve announces July launch for the FedNow service. The service will debut with financial institutions and the U.S. Treasury on board. The Federal Reserve announced that the FedNow service will start operating in July and provided details on preparations for launch. The first week of April, the Federal Reserve will begin the formal certification of participants for launch of the service, and early adopters will complete a customer testing and certification program informed by feedback from the FedNow pilot program to prepare for sending live transactions on the system. This is not a central bank digital currency in that there's an article here from Cointelegraph saying that this is not based on blockchain technology. It says right here, according to them. However, it is an instant payment service. And if you want to find out more, you can simply go to explore.fednow.org, as you can see up here. And then if you go to Explore the City, they have a really cool interactive section in which you can look at all the different features, the news. If we go into a building on features gallery, for example, they have some videos and some documents on features. You can look at the technology that they have and how it's going to work. Use Case Arena is talking about who would use it and why and what you would want to do. So they've got all that planned out. And here's news and a university to teach you about it. So it's pretty cool. And essentially what it is it's just instantaneous payments between consumers, businesses, and anybody that has a bank account with a participating Fed bank can access FedNow. And this is software that they've set up that apparently is not blockchain, but it does allow for instant payments. It'll settle, it says here, according to Cointelegraph, the instant payment network will settle payments in seconds and can support transactions between consumers, merchants, and banks. It's a significant step for the government as it's controlled by the Federal Reserve. Clearinghouse's RTP network, which offers real-time payments, is operated by a consortium of large banks. Somebody else, a competitor. The U.S. Fed said the debut of FedNow is set for July with U.S. Treasury and a diverse mix of financial institutions of all sizes. Early adopters will complete a customer testing and certification program, so on and so forth. It's going to push. The Federal Reserve has said it will onboard as many financial institutions as possible. So I assume that will take a while, maybe a year or two before everybody's really into the FedNow service. And essentially, that's about it. Now, some of the competitors were Silvergate's SEN, Silvergate Exchange Network. And of course, you had Signature Bank, Signet. One comment I had here, I thought it was kind of interesting that I was doing research for this, that the two banks that were running competitors to the FedNow service in terms of private payments, SEN and Signet from Signature Bank and Silvergate, were two of the first banks to go out this year that had banking issues. And so it's up in the air whether Signet and Send will continue. And it seems as though, at the very least, that the FedNow system has the inside track for payments. And so as I look at the landscape of things, I think FedNow, what the government wants is FedNow to be all payments if they can get it there, and to get rid of competitors like Send and Signet, which would offer that through the banking system, and maybe even over-the-top services like Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal, perhaps, or at least maybe they'll regulate those down. And if they regulate those down, then that would reduce the amount of transactions going through them, most likely. So through regulation, they could de-emphasize some of these competitors. And I suspect that that's probably what they're going to do. I just find it very interesting that Silvergate and with their Send network, and also SVB had, with Signet, had the competitors to FedNow. They're both gone, and now it's up in the air as to what's going to happen with those. That was just very interesting. But I also, so this is essentially, as we look at an article on Silvergate from CNBC from earlier in March, they're the ones that had the Send networking. You can see here, it's got it down here in the in here where it talks about Send and Silvergate and all that good stuff. So if you guys want to read that, here it is. Liquidation comes less than a week after Silvergate discontinued its payments platform known as Send. So the competing ones didn't make it. FedNow looks like it's going to be a monopoly. We'll see whether that affects the over-the-tops, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, all those kind, and there are tons of those types of payment apps. But I think those will probably be regulated as such to where they don't compete with FedNow. They're not allowed to compete with FedNow. But I think it's here, and I think the United States, having been a slow adopter of blockchain technology and also having such a negative view, meaning that the SEC and all these other groups, the COMEC, the CFTC, are going to regulate cryptos, that the U.S. government does not want to take the blockchain approach right now for its central banks. I think that's coming. But I also think because they were such slow adopters, that they didn't have their system ready. And so I think that others had. So others had put together their systems. They had their systems in place, but US was not an early social adopter. And so I think FedNow was probably the system that they could get put into place on existing technology that would allow them to do payments. I don't think they were quite ready for the crypto revolution. If you look at who's launched, you can see the one here in Nigeria that we've talked about, written in articles. It was launched at first. The way they did it was, Nigeria said you can only get 45 of the local currency out of the ATM, amounted to a few dollars a day, and people couldn't afford that. And so there were protests. I'll show you some of the protests here in a moment. And then they tried to force adoption of the central bank digital currency in Nigeria. People didn't right off the bat. It was like 0.25% or something like that. But when they cash starved the population, they were forced to adopt it because they had no choice. And that's what happened in Nigeria. That's the largest economy, by the way, in dollar terms, in Africa. So the largest economy in Africa has adopted it. They forced it. They've got it launched in Jamaica and in the Bahamas as well. And the reason that they're forcing this in Nigeria, I believe, is to see how it will go in a large scale economy that was heavy cash, to see what they need to do to get rid of cash, to facilitate this, to get people to adopt it. Then you see who's got the pilot program, and you can see that this is all geopolitical realignment. You can see all the geopolitical alignment we have with the BRICS nations really aligns with the cryptocurrency projects as well. So they're going to facilitate trade in cryptocurrencies along new geopolitical borders that are being formed right now. You know, the Russia-Ukraine is forming a new geopolitical boundary between the West and the East. And we know with the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS that they were instituting new trade agreements together. And you can see, you can see a lot of these cryptos, which are going to facilitate a lot of that trade going forward, being developed. Of course, if you look at the ones in development, you've got all the ones that are a little bit more skittish, a little bit more in the Western side as to adopting the system. You've got the United States and Canada. Of course, down here, we also have Brazil. I think this is the largest economy in South Africa. I'm sorry, South America. We've got Venezuela, Haiti, Belize, all working on those. Of course, you have a lot of Europe working on that as well, a lot of Scandinavia, some of the Middle East. Indonesia is working on that as well, the Philippines, Taiwan. So you start to see some of the Western powers and their counterparts or trade parties start to align. Now they're behind, so you're going to see it roll out in China and in parts of Africa first, and then it will go there. And then there's some that are still under research. You can see that you've got a lot of these little areas, Laos, some of these third world countries, or a little bit less money. Mexico have a little bit less money, a little bit less farther along. Peru, Chile down here. And then you can see some that kind of quite aren't there yet, but probably will be brought into it when they need to. Argentina, of course, is in there. So you can kind of see the world aligning, and the guys that have it launched first, you know, you're seeing the problems, but then you see the ones coming right behind. You got this block, and that's a lot of the BRIC nations, and then you're going to have the Western nations. So the United States is behind. That's why they're using FedNow instead of a digital dollar. I think this is a precursor to digital dollar, because what it does is it uses the existing banking system to get people into electronic payments, and then they'll implement the digital currencies on top. Remember what I've been saying probably for 2+ almost 3 years. The IMF research paper on digital currencies and on cash and on getting rid of cash and on changeovers in monetary systems indicated it takes about a generation to flip over to a new monetary system. And so I think the FedNow is that transition system from the cash dollar into electronic payments using the tech they have now. As the blockchain technology manifests and gets more mature for commercial use, which is not quite there yet. I've been saying that even Bitcoin's not quite there yet. But as they get that technology ready, then they can switch over from FedNow to the blockchain. And it'll be seamless to everybody because it'll be in the background. It'll be all software that the banks load and an app on your phone that's going to be transparent to you. You're not going to have to do anything other than create a login for your account. And in fact, they can just, you know, keep your account number and your login information and all your ledger and just port it to the new one. So from your side as a consumer, you're going to log into your bank account, you're going to get a bank statement, you're going to use your debit card and not see a change through the whole system from now to FedNow to then, I don't think. They could come out maybe with a new app, with a new interface on the website, but a lot of this you're not going to see. So this is how they're doing it. They're doing it behind the scenes, slowly implementing the technology so that we can do electronic payments in tranches or steps. And then what you'll see is they're rolling out in a pilot form in other countries with smaller economies to see how that goes. You've got China and Asia, in Africa, you got Nigeria, and you got other pilot projects in the rest of the world. So Nigeria and China are really they're the test subjects, if you will. The United States will learn from that and will come from behind. Why? Because they have the world's reserve currency. And it also makes sense because some of the other currencies come under pressure first. Why? Because the dollar is still the world reserve currency, still the strongest. And it'll be the last to melt down. So it makes sense as to where you'll see the implementation of the new system in other regions and jurisdictions ahead of time, because they're the ones that get affected by all the problems with the dollar right now. Well, now I wanted to turn to that, and I wanted to talk about what's happened. There have been some protests and things in Nigeria resulting from the currency. So we're going to play just a real quick, and the sound's not going to be great here, but we're just going to play real quick a video here in which they're going to talk about what's going on with that. And here's basically just a news report. And I find it very interesting as we listen to this and look at the images of what's going on in Nigeria. When they first rolled out the CBDC without having this transition system like the FedNow, like we'll have in the US, it caused all sorts of problems. So at least in the US, they're doing a transition system. This is what it looks like as reported by TVC News Nigeria.
The Supreme Court was presiding over the Naira swap policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Protests broke out in Benin as protesters blocked major roads to show their frustration and anger over the ongoing crisis around the CBN Naira redesign policy that has caused untold hardship on the people. Bonfires, blockade of roads, chanting of different slogans filled the air as the protesters expressed their anger. The protests began when traders besieged the Central Bank office in Benin, demanding for the new Naira notes, claiming that the policy has adversely affected their source of livelihood. The protests, however, degenerated and became violent as journalists and cameramen were also attacked. And for more on this, let's talk to TVC News Paul Ezewa, who joins us live via Zoom from Edo State. Paul.
All right, and as we go on to this story, here's a story from IndiaTimes.com. Protests erupt in Africa's most populous country, Nigeria, as demonetization resulting in cash crisis. It says here, more than 6 years after PM Modi announced demonetization, India, Africa's most populous country, Nigeria, is witnessing massive protests after it announced a similar move. According to News Express Nigeria, large-scale protests have been taking place in Nigeria as citizens attack banks and ATMs due to a cash shortage. Nigeria has been struggling with a shortage of cash since the Central Bank of Nigeria began to swap old notes of the local naira for new ones. The decision to monetize $200, $500, $1,000 naira notes was announced in October, and the last day to hand in notes was set for January. Deadline to swap notes extended to February. Protests amid general elections this week, and banks have access to limited cash. Here's a video of an ATM that was just absolutely destroyed, probably because of frustration of people not being able to get enough money out to survive in it. Here we go with that video. And then here you can see people just trying to get access to infrastructure and get access to ATMs and things like that. Here are the long lines. I mean, this is what happens when you roll out and people aren't prepared. And this is what's in the India Times story. Analysts reportedly of the view of Nigeria's infrastructure is not robust enough to support digital payments. So this is what happens when I roll out too quick. And I think this is why, as the U.S. looks at what's happened in Nigeria and in China with the rejection of the CBDCs and the rough rollout here in Nigeria, that they're doing the FedNow system as opposed to just rolling straight into the digital dollar. And I think that, again, that has to do with the research IMF and BIS did with regards to it takes about a generation to move into new monetary and payment systems. And so their FedNow is sort of that intermediary system to get people into it without the issues that we saw in Nigeria. And I think the U.S. is learning from that. Here's a protest outside a bank in Zhengzhou, China, talking about China bank protest as they also had some issues as well.
And in Zhengzhou in China, police clashing with demonstrators on Sunday, demonstrators who were angry that some rural banks have kept millions of dollars frozen since April. At the time, the banks said they were upgrading their internal systems, but customers say they've heard nothing from the banks about the matter since then. The protest was among the largest in China since the pandemic. For more on this, I'm joined by CNN's Stephen Jiang in Beijing. Extraordinary scenes. What's behind it? What's being done about it?
Michael, indeed such an extraordinary scene to see more than 1,000 people show up on Sunday morning to stage this rare protest in front of the provincial branch of the country's central bank demanding their money back. But that's also why the provincial authorities went to such great lengths, as you mentioned, even tampering with these people's health QR codes, which is such a basic necessity for anyone in China to leave their homes these days. But that effort really...
And so basically what they're saying there, hopefully the sound was good on that recording, is that in April, and this is the exact same time in April that China rolled out their central bank digital currency. Now, they haven't eliminated cash, but they wanted to reduce cash. And so they rolled out central bank digital currency in April. At the same time, in a lot of rural banks, as you can see in this story, there was a limitation on deposits frozen. People could not get their money. So the only way for some people in the rural areas to get access to money would have been to use the central bank digital currency system, because the banks, at the exact same time they rolled out central bank digital currencies, a lot of these rural banks shut down cash withdrawals and deposits. And in addition, in China, they've taken it a step further and they have the social credit system. So I have this neat graphic from Horizons that I wanted to show you what the social credit system is. It's basically like a ladder-based system or a merit-based system or a ladder-based system. You can lose points or have them deducted for certain things, such as traffic offenses, protesting against the authorities, not visiting parents regularly, spreading rumors on the internet, posting anti-government messages on social media, insincere apologies for crimes committed, cheating in online games. They could take away from your social credit score. And then if you do good things like engaging in charity work, taking care of elderly family members, influencing one's neighborhood, helping the poor, you could get more credit. And then that credit system in China is tied to the banking system so that you may not be able to get access to money if you don't have enough points. So there's a point-based system and that China is using that they've tied to the payment system. So that if you didn't do everything that they wanted, of course, that allows the government to control not only monetary flows, but now they're getting into culture and politics and society. Whether or not that type of system would ever be rolled out in anywhere in the Western world, especially the United States, is up for debate. But that's what you can do. You can tie that system in, essentially, to you can tie that system into the monetary system. And now, since you have the two tied together, authorities can enforce regulations and rules that way. That could be pretty scary if you broke a rule or regulation and didn't have access to your account. Of course, we saw in China, they locked out the bank accounts of some rural depositors. At the same time, they rolled out central bank digital currency. In Nigeria, they rolled out central bank digital currency and cut access to cash as well. That's the way it's been done. And so those are really rough introductions to central bank digital currencies and digital systems. The US is going to roll out the FedNow and do it. They're going to make it more amenable to people by rolling out FedNow electronic payments, getting people hooked, probably rolling out legislation at the same time to affect the other over-the-top third-party payment systems like Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal, and those types, I would imagine, making it more, and this will happen over time. They're going to do it right away because remember, they got a generation, about 20 years to do all this. So they have some time to get people into FedNow, to not understand they're even using FedNow because it's behind the scenes. It's transparent to people. They don't see it. So you would, all of it behind the scene. And then when people are used to all digital payments, then they can start rolling out the central bank digital currencies. And then if they wanted, they could roll out rules like a social credit system, if that's something that lawmakers want to do. But here right now in the US, we have slightly different system. FedNow slightly different, but I think a precursor to the digital dollar and the central bank digital currencies. The US is behind. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take years. According to the article we read at Cointelegraph, it would be about 5 years to prepare the system to accept the technology for a central bank digital currency in the US. Whether or not they're already there yet, doesn't seem quite like it, but at least now we know what the system looks like. And for me, going back 3 years ago, originally writing about it in 2019, beginning of 2019, in fact, I think it was April 2019, 4 years ago, I first wrote about it, to now 4 years later, seeing how that system is going to be put into place. I think we have our blueprint. And if you want to be outside that system, it's going to be gold, silver, any private cryptos that are allowed to survive. Now, a lot of the banking on and off ramps have been taken down. So if you're in Bitcoin or Ethereum or those types of digital currencies right now, it could be more difficult for you to get to your money or to put money into your system. Of course, some of the exchanges have failed, regulation coming for the exchanges. So I think it puts some uncertainty up on the private cryptos. So maybe the private cryptos is a way to go to stay outside the FedNow system if you're wanting to do that. Or maybe gold and silver is the way to do it. Of course, gold and silver is constitutional money. There's a lawful impetus behind that to restore gold and silver as money, even if it's just competing with other systems. I think there's a constitutional argument to be made for that. But for right now, it looks like the system that we're going to have. And because they're rolling out like this, I don't think we're going to have the widespread protests like we saw in China and like we saw in Nigeria, unless they do it the same way. It doesn't look like they're going to. It looks like we're going to get more of a gradual, soft rollout here in the US, and that's how they're going to do it. No word on when they're going to cut the banking system and access to cash. It doesn't seem like the US lawmakers are wanting to jump right on that wagon right off the bat. I think they want to see how FedNow goes. And I think it makes more sense here in the US, if you're going to roll it out, to essentially roll it out slowly in the banking system behind the scenes so as not to affect people, and allow people to get used to that system and gradually roll it and nudge people into the central bank digital currency, unless there's a crash. Now, if there's a financial crash, you know, all bets are off, as I like to say, and it's possible they roll a central bank digital currency system out much faster and a digital dollar out much faster. But at least now with FedNow, they've got the nuts and bolts, the plumbing, if you will, the infrastructure of that system in place. And all they got to do is finish their testing on the blockchain, what they want to use, and they can roll out the digital dollar on top. So progressing along the path, that's where we are. That's an update on that. And so I think we have a good idea where everybody stands, who's at the forefront, who's coming behind, and what that's going to look like. Of course, we're going to continue to follow this on this channel as we go forward. Stay tuned, and I will have more for you. This has been Rob Kientz of Gold Silver Pros. Until next time.
Hey, thanks for watching. We selected these videos just for you. Check them out. And remember, $4.99 a month keeps the lights on and the channel going. So join our Gold Silver Pro supporter membership. We appreciate your support. Keep stacking.